Good morning, students. In today's session, we are going to see a lesson from your Hornbill book, which is chapter 1 called The Portrait of a Lady, written by Kushwant Singh. Yes, by the title, you might have predicted what might be the lesson is. Yes, it's obviously about a lady. Again, it puts you in a interrogative that who was that lady? She is nothing but author's grandmother, that is Kushwant Singh's granny. A few snippets about the author. Kushwant Singh was an Indian author, lawyer, diplomat, journalist, and a politician. His experience in the 1947 partition of India inspired him to write Train to Pakistan in 1956, which became his most well known novel. Theme of the lesson. The Portrait of a Lady is a part of an autobiography by Kushwant Singh. So the lesson is written in autobiographical mode. In the story, the author draws a pen portrait of his grandmother. Her beautiful unfolds their relationship and how it undergoes several changes. So they had a good bonding between them. After a while, it bridges a gap. In other words, the story is a loving tribute from a grandson to his grandmother. The story gives a picture of human relationships. It is a realistic account of how the grandparents give all their time, attention, and love to their grandchildren. This is what the theme of the lesson. Now, coming to the characters in the lesson, there are two protagonists in the lesson. The one is the author, the Kushwant Singh, and his grandmother. The first phase of the story is the grandmother's appearance. As the author, Kushwant Singh, has given an account of his grandmother, he draws a lifelike portrait. He describes her grandmother was very old, her face was wrinkled, her hair was white. It was very hard to believe that once she had been young and pretty. Also, his grandfather's picture hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban, his clothes were loose, he looked at least 100 years old. Father describes his grandmother as a short lady, fat and slightly bent. She couldn't walk straight. She hobbled. Hobble means like having a twisted angle since her feet or legs were hurted, so that she always want to keep one hand on her waist. It was to balance her too, whereas on the other hand she held a rosary. Rosary in sense a string of small round pieces of wood, uh, in which most of Roman Catholics use for counting prayers. She was always telling the beads. Her lips constantly moved in prayer. She put on white clothes, her silver locks scattered over her pale face. She looked like snowy mountains in winter. She was a picture of serene and peace. Though she was very old, perhaps she could not have looked like older. She looked the same for the last 20 years. This is all about the appearance of the grandmother. In the second phase, the author recalls his memories of his childhood days with his grandmother. The narrator, in his childhood, shared a beautiful relationship with his grandmother as they were very good friends. His parents left him with her when they went to live in the city. Hence, she was guardian, friend, and soul taker of the narrator. Every morning, she used to wake him up and get him ready for the school. She also used to sing her morning prayers for the narrator, which was really loved by the narrator. She would fetch the narrator's wooden slate and plaster it with yellow chalk. Also, she would give him a stale chapati with little butter and sugar spread on it. It was his breakfast. Likewise, she helped a lot in escorting him to the school. Every day she used to carry several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. His grandmother always accompanied him to the school. Since the school was attached to the temple, the priest taught children the alphabet and the morning prayer. The children sat in two rows in the veranda. They would sing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. The grandmother sat inside the temple. She would read holy books. Then they would walk together to the home. The village dogs would gather at the temple door. They threw chapatis to them. The dogs would growl and fight with each other. Here comes the next stage, that is the turning point in narrator and grandmother's friendship. There was a big turning point in narrator and grandmother's friendship when the narrator's parents were settled in the city. They called the narrator and the grandmother to lead a city life, but their life was totally changed. Although they shared the same room, but the grandmother no longer had a chance to get him to school. Kushwant Singh used to go to an English medium school in a motor bus. Also, the grandmother noticed that there were no dogs in the streets, so the grandmother took to feed breadcrumbs to the sparrows in the courtyard, that is, in the veranda. As they started leading a mechanical life in the city, they saw less of each other. That is the author Kushwant Singh and his grandmother. Sometimes she would ask him what the teacher had taught him. She did not believe in the things they taught at the English school. She was unhappy about the teaching of English words and Western science terminologies taught by the English school. Therefore, could not help the narrator in his lessons. Also, she was more distressed as there was no teaching about the God and the scriptures. And after knowing about the music classes given to the narrator, she even got more disturbed. According to her, music had lewd effect, lewd in sense abuse way. As per her, that is the grandmother's generation, the music was only meant for beggars and prostitutes, and it is not meant for gentle folks, that is not for the common people. Finally, she was put up in melancholy of sorrow. Only loneliness surrounds her. So, dear students, in this video, I've covered two phases of author's life. The remaining part of the lesson will be continued in the next session.